These scams can make a ton of money, and they are one of the most popular types of scam in Vietnam right now. What's up everyone? Chào các bạn và chào mừng các bạn quay trở lại với podcast Slow and Clear của What's Up English. In this podcast, you're going to learn a ton of useful words and phrases to talk about scams and how to avoid them. Also, make sure to listen until the end of the podcast, where we'll review some high-level vocabulary words from this podcast that will help you to take your English to the next level. But first, let me tell you a quick story about the first time in my life that I got scammed. So the first time I got scammed was in a game called RuneScape. Now, in this game, I had spent weeks saving up to buy this really cool item that I was pretty proud of. So I was wearing the item and walking around when this player came up to me and told me he knew a secret to duplicate the item. Duplicate means to make a copy of it. So to make two of them. So instead of one item, I would have two. And he said all I needed to do was drop my armor on the ground and then press Alt F4 on my keyboard, and then I would magically have two of them because of a bug in the game. So being around 10 years old and extremely naive, I thought, wow, okay, sounds good. Let's do it. So I dropped the item on the ground and pressed Alt F4. Now, what I didn't know was that Alt F4 is the keyboard shortcut to close your program immediately. So when I pressed it, my game closed, and by the time I logged back in, the other player had picked up my item and disappeared. At the time, I was really devastated because I had spent a lot of time to get that item, and then it was gone just like that. And that was the first time in my life that I got scammed, and I still remember it till this day. Now, it's kind of funny when I look back on it, but at that time, of course, I was pretty heartbroken about it. However, I did learn a valuable lesson. That is, if something sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. Ever since then, I've been really careful about scams. So luckily, it was just an item in a video game and not real money. So I told you this story just to show that scams are everywhere and anybody can get scammed. Now this leads to the main content of this podcast. So in this podcast, we're going to cover four main things. First, we'll talk about how scams have evolved over time. Second, we'll look at some of the most common modern scams in Vietnam with some stories about each one, including a very famous scam in Vietnam that was uncovered just a few months ago. Third, we'll talk about the psychology behind scams, like why even smart people fall for them. And finally, I'll give you some red flags to watch out for and tips to protect yourself from scams. But before we start, if you want to improve your listening skills and learn useful vocabulary, then check out my product called The 1000 Most Common Words in English. This product is an organized PDF of the 1000 most common words in English, and every word includes the IPA pronunciation in American English, the meaning of each word, and example sentences. It comes with slow and clear audio files read by me for every single word and sentence, so you can practice your listening skills and read along to practice your pronunciation. It even comes with a study guide showing you how to learn and practice 10 new words each day. So if you want to check that out, then just click the link in the description below. With that purchase, you won't only improve your English skills, but you'll also help to support the channel. So thank you so much. All right, let's get started first with the evolution of scams. As you probably know, scams aren't really new. They've been around basically forever. In the old days, you had these guys called snake oil salesmen who would travel from town to town selling fake medicine that they claimed could cure anything from baldness to cancer, you name it. And these people would set up in a market or town square and make these crazy claims about their products, like, oh, it can cure this, or it can help you do that. So, of course, people would buy their products and it wouldn't have those effects. But by the time they realized that, those snake oil salesmen were already in another town. So that is an old type of scam. But as technology has grown, scams, of course, have evolved too. They've gone from mail scams to phone scams to email scams. And now we have social media and messaging app scams. The platforms change, but the basic techniques stay pretty much the same. What's different now is the scale. In the past, a scammer might have been able to trick a few dozen people in their lifetime. But now they can reach millions of potential victims with modern technology, like what we've seen with a few big Ponzi schemes and, schemes on messaging apps, Zallo, WhatsApp, all those things. So one thing that many people wonder is, why do scams continue to persist and evolve despite increased awareness of them? Well, it's because they work. Even if only 1% of people fall for a scam, if you send it to 1 million people, that's still 10,000 victims. And that's a lot of money. And scammers are always adapting and changing their methods. As soon as people catch on to one type of scam, the scammers modify it or create a new one. So now, speaking of new scams, let's move on to some common modern scams in Vietnam. For each of these, I'll tell you a story about each one to help you understand how they work. First, let's talk about one of the most dangerous scams in Vietnam right now, which is the police impersonation scam. This scam is something that I've heard about a lot. Like, I've seen the warnings posted in the elevator, and I've even gotten texts to my phone of people claiming to be the police. So here's how it typically works. First, you receive a call or a text from someone claiming to be a police officer or like a government official. They might even spoof their caller ID to make it look like they're calling you from an official number. They tell you that you're involved in some kind of legal trouble. Like, maybe they say your ID card was found at a crime scene, or that you're suspected of money laundering or tax evasion. And the scammer will sound very official, and they might even know some basic information about you, like your full name and your address. Then they'll create a sense of fear and panic, saying that you could be arrested unless you cooperate with their investigation. Sometimes they'll transfer you to other officers to make it seem more legitimate, but eventually they'll ask you to transfer money to a secure government account or something for safekeeping during the investigation, or to prove your money isn't from illegal activities. Once you transfer the money, of course, it's gone, and you'll never hear from these police officers again. So remember, of course, real police officers in Vietnam will never call you and ask you for money transfers. So remember, if you get a call or a text like this, just hang up the call or ignore the text, and you could report it to the police. Another very common scam in Vietnam is the OTP, which means one-time password scam. This scam is super important to know about because it can happen to anyone with a bank account or e-wallet. So here's how it works. First, you get a call or a message from someone claiming to be from your bank or Momo, ZaloPay, or any other financial service. They might say they're updating their system, checking for suspicious activity, or maybe that you've won a prize. Then they'll ask you to share the OTP code that was just sent to your phone. What's actually happening is that the scammer is trying to log into your account on their device. And this triggers the real service to send you an OTP. If you give them that code, they'll have full access to your account, and they can transfer all the money out, or they can make payments with your account, whatever. So whatever you do, do not share your OTP with anyone, no matter who they claim to be, because no legitimate bank or e-wallet service or company will ever ask you for your OTP over the phone or in a message. All right, next scam. Now let's talk about marketplace scams. And these are very common in Vietnam. Here's how it would happen. So let's say you're browsing Chợ Tốt or Facebook Marketplace, and you see an incredible deal. Maybe it's the new iPhone for 50% off, or a luxury bag that usually costs 20 million dong, but now it's listed for just 2 million. Sounds like a great deal. So you message the seller, but the seller has a story. Maybe they got that item as a gift and they don't need it, or maybe they're moving abroad and they need to sell it quickly. So when you talk to them, they're super friendly and they're helpful, but there's always a catch. Like they can't meet in person, or the item needs to be shipped from far away. So they ask for payment up front, meaning payment before you get the item. Maybe that could be through a bank transfer or an e-wallet. Once they receive your money, they disappear, or they send you a fake or just a completely different item. Now, this happens a lot, especially with high value items like phones and motorbikes. So remember, if a deal seems too good to be true, then it probably is. All right, so another type of scam that is common, not just in Vietnam, but around the world, is called the romance scam. These scams usually target women, and it might be done differently depending on the country, but in Western countries like the USA and Canada, scammers often pose as people in the military who are deployed overseas. Here's a typical story of how this scam would happen. There was a woman, let's call her Sarah, who met a guy online who claimed to be an American soldier stationed in Afghanistan. His profile showed a handsome man in military uniform, and he was very charming and attentive when he spoke to her. He would message her good morning and good night every day, despite the time difference, because he's such a good guy. And he would call her when he could, and he just really seemed invested in learning about her life. So after about 2 months of talking, he told Sarah he was having trouble accessing his military pay and needed a short-term loan of around $2,000, which he promised to pay back once he returned to the US. Because she trusted him and thought they had a real connection, she sent him the money. Then he needed more money for another emergency, like maybe medical bills or to help a fellow soldier. Eventually, she'd realized she'd been scammed when he disappeared after getting about $8,000 from her. You know, sometimes these scams are even way more money. They could be $50,000, $100,000. I've seen cases where it's even a few $100,000. The thing is, for many of these people, the worst part wasn't even losing the money, but it was finding out that the relationship that they thought was real was actually all a lie. So this type of scam happens to people all over the world. Many of them are women, but they can happen to men too. And throughout these scams, the pattern is the same. The person builds trust, they create an emergency, and then they ask for money, and after that, they disappear. Okay, so the last type of scam we'll talk about is the investment scam. These scams can make a ton of money, and they are one of the most popular types of scam in Vietnam right now. So here's how the typical investment scam would happen. So imagine you're scrolling through social media and you see a popular influencer showing off luxury cars and villas, claiming they made their fortune through Forex trading or cryptocurrency or something like that. So you look into it a bit and you find out they have offices across Vietnam, professional looking websites, and they even use real trading platforms. Everything seems legit. Then they offer you an investment opportunity with 20 to 30% monthly returns. That's pretty amazing. So you start with a small amount, and surprisingly, you see profits immediately on the platform. So now you're super excited and you decide to invest more money. But when you try to withdraw your earnings, suddenly there's all these fees that you need to pay first, or the platform is having some technical problems and you can't actually withdraw your money. Some reason here or there that stops you from getting your money back. So then eventually you might find out that the influencer has been arrested, their offices have been shut down, and thousands of people have lost their money. This story might sound familiar because something very similar happened here in Vietnam recently, where a social media personality, I'm not going to say his name, was arrested for running one of the largest investment scams in Vietnam's history. So the authorities seized, which means took, billions of dong in assets, and thousands of people lost their savings. So, of course, be super careful with any investment promising guaranteed high returns with no risk, especially if it's being promoted by influencers showing off, luxury cars and their lavish lifestyles, all that stuff. Okay, so we've talked about a few different types of scams. Now let's talk about the psychology behind scams. The question that many people ask is, why do even smart people fall for these scams? I think it's important to understand this because sometimes people can feel stupid when they get scammed. But really, scammers are just exploiting basic human psychology. Like, scammers know exactly which emotional triggers to use against you. They use fear, like when they pretend to be the police, saying you're involved in a crime. They use greed, promising huge returns on investments or things like lottery winnings. And greed is also how I got scammed for the first time, because I wanted 2 of my item, and that's what got me scammed. They can also use love and connection, like in romance scams, and they always create a sense of urgency, like you have to act now or you'll miss out, or you have to decide quickly or something bad will happen. And when we're emotional, we don't think as clearly as we would normally. Our rational brain gets overpowered by our emotions. So along with using our emotions against us, scammers also use social engineering techniques. They might pretend to be an authority figure like the police or in the government. They create fake personas that seem trustworthy. They use like complicated words to confuse you. And they often know just enough personal information about you. Maybe they got your address and your name from a data breach or from social media, and that helps them to seem legitimate. Okay, so now that we know some different types of scams and the tricks that scammers use to scam people, what are some red flags to watch out for across different types of scams? Here are the main ones. Number 1 is urgency. If someone is pressuring you to act immediately, that's a huge red flag. Number 2, they request you to use unusual payment methods. So if someone asks you to pay through gift cards or cryptocurrency or some type of money transfer, be careful. Number 3, they ask for your personal information. Legitimate companies won't ask you for passwords or OTP codes or complete ID details over the phone or email. And of course, whatever you do, do not give your OTP no matter what. Just do not do it. Number 4, poor grammar or spelling. So if the scam is in English, they say that they could use poor grammar or spelling because maybe the scammer's first language isn't English. But another reason they might use poor grammar or spelling in English or Vietnamese is to filter out the people who are attentive to detail. For example, if someone responds to an email that has these spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes, then it shows that that person isn't super attentive to details, and therefore they are an easier target for the scammer. That saves the scammer's time because they don't want to waste time to try to scam people who are harder to scam. Okay. Red flag number 5 is when an offer seems too good to be true. So whether it's an investment, a product, a job, if the offer seems unrealistic, then it probably is. And number 6 is emotional manipulation. So if you feel like unusually scared or excited or emotionally pressured, then just step back and think critically. Really try to be careful. Okay, so those were a few red flags to look out for. Make sure if any of those pop up, then be very careful. Now let's go over some key vocabulary words that we used just now when talking about scams. Okay, the first word, of course, is scam. Scam. I think you already know what it means. Another example is, he fell for an online scam and lost money. So a scam can be a noun, like that's a scam, or it can be a verb, like he scammed me. The next word is impersonation. Impersonation. Impersonation is a noun, meaning to pretend to be someone else. The verb form is impersonate. Impersonate. So for example, we could say, the scammer was impersonating a bank employee. All right, the next word is OTP, which means one-time password. OTP. Now, an OTP is a security code that is valid for only one login. For example, never share your OTP with anyone. The next word is legitimate. Legitimate. This is an adjective which describes something that is real, legal, or genuine, so not fake. For example, legitimate companies won't ask for your password over the phone. The next word is urgency. Urgency. So urgency is when something requires immediate action. Urgency is a noun and urgent is the adjective. For example, the scammer created urgency by saying the offer would expire in 1 hour. The next word is spoof. Spoof. So spoof, this is a verb when scammers disguise their phone number or email to make it look like it's coming from somewhere else, like a trusted source. For example, they spoofed the bank's phone number to make their call seem genuine. And genuine means the same as legitimate. The next word is red flag. Red flag. This is a noun, and it's a warning sign of danger or a problem. For example, being asked to pay via gift card is a major red flag. The next one is Ponzi scheme. Ponzi scheme. So a scheme is like a plan, and Ponzi, you've probably already heard that in Vietnamese. So a Ponzi scheme is a type of scam where existing investors are paid with the money from new investors, which makes them think that they're getting legitimate returns on their investments. For example, the investment turned out to be a Ponzi scheme that collapsed when they couldn't find new investors. All right, the next word is naive. Naive. Naive is an adjective which describes a lack of experience or wisdom or judgment, like being too trusting. For example, I was naive to believe I could get rich quickly without any risk. Okay, the next word is authenticate. Authenticate. So authenticate is the verb, authentication is the noun, and this means to prove or verify the identity of a person or thing. For example, two-factor authentication helps protect your accounts. The next word is fraudulent. Fraudulent. So fraudulent is an adjective. The noun is fraud. And this means to be obtained, done by, or involving deception, meaning tricking you, especially to get your money. For example, the website was fraudulent and designed to steal credit card information. All right, guys, so if you want to keep practicing your listening skills and learning new words and hear about the time I got scammed at my first job, then check out this video right here. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later.